The bus shuddered to a stop outside Fort Camden's main gate, and Sergeant First Class Adiz Okonkwo stepped onto Georgia soil with her duffel bag slung across her shoulder. Gray clouds stretched across the morning sky like a bruise that refused to heal. She had seen skies like this before, in places she could not name, over terrain that existed only in classified documents and the quiet corners of her memory. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have seen someone face unfair judgment only to later reveal their true worth. We would love to hear your story. Adiz adjusted the weight of her bag and walked toward the processing center. Her boots found a rhythm on the pavement, the same rhythm her father had taught her when she was 7 years old, marching alongside him in their Houston backyard. Chukwemeka Okonkwo had come to America from Nigeria with nothing but determination and a dream of serving the country that gave him a second chance. He had faced every obstacle the Army could throw at a black immigrant in the 1980s, and he had never once surrendered his dignity. That lesson lived in his daughter now, carried in her spine like steel. The processing sergeant barely looked up when she handed over her transfer papers. He stamped them without a word and pointed toward Building 7. Adiz thanked him and walked on. Building 7 housed the headquarters for her new unit, and she found it easily enough. The moment she stepped through the doors, she felt the shift in atmosphere. Conversations stopped. Eyes turned. She had experienced this before, the assessment that happened whenever she entered a new space, but there was something sharper here, something that tasted like rust and old anger. A staff sergeant leaned against a desk near the entrance, arms crossed over his chest. His name, Tape, read Renfro, and his expression read contempt. He looked her up and down with the kind of deliberate slowness designed to make a person feel small. Well, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Looks like we got ourselves another diversity hire. Laughter rippled through the room. Adiz let it wash over her like water off stone. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. In a frozen forest 6,000 miles away, she had lain motionless for 11 hours waiting for a single shot that would save a dying man. These boys and their jokes were nothing. She approached the front desk, where a young private sat pretending to organize papers. "I am Sergeant First Class Okonkwo," she said, "reporting for duty." The private glanced nervously at Renfro before responding. "Yes, Sergeant. Master Sergeant Crumley will see you shortly. You can wait over there." Adiz moved to the indicated area and stood at ease. Her eyes traveled across the room, cataloging exits and personnel out of habit. Then she saw it. A framed photograph hung prominently on the wall, showing a distinguished officer in dress uniform. Colonel Harlan Vance. The man smiled from behind the glass, proud and vital, completely unaware that 16 months ago he had been bleeding out in the snow while 14 enemy fighters closed in on his position. Adiz remembered the weight of her rifle that day. She remembered the cold seeping through her ghillie suit and the crystalline clarity that descended over her mind when she placed her eye to the scope. 14 targets, 14 shots, 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Colonel Vance had been evacuated to a field hospital while she was extracted through a separate route, her involvement immediately classified. He had never seen her face. He did not know that a 31-year-old black woman from Houston was the reason his heart still beat. She looked at his photograph now and felt nothing but quiet resolve. Staff Sergeant Renfro appeared at her side, standing too close. He smelled like cheap cologne and unearned confidence. "That there is Colonel Vance," he said as if she were illiterate. "Greatest commander this army has ever seen. Man is a legend. He survived an ambush that should have killed him because he is just that good." He looked at her with naked disdain. "Bet you have never even seen real combat." Adiz held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds before looking away. It was not submission. It was dismissal. A predator does not waste energy on prey that poses no threat. Renfro's jaw tightened at her non-response. He wanted anger. He wanted tears. He wanted anything he could use against her. Her calm was an insult he could not forgive. The door to the inner office opened, and a woman in her late 40s emerged. Master Sergeant Loretta Crumley had the weathered face of someone who had seen enough foolishness to last several lifetimes. Her eyes swept the room and landed on Adiz with something that might have been recognition. "Sergeant First Class Okonkwo," she said. "Come with me." Adiz followed her into the office, and the door closed behind them, shutting out the whispers and the laughter and the small cruelties of small men. She did not know yet that her gear would be thrown in the trash by morning. She did not know that the words scrawled on her locker would burn with a hatred older than this nation. She only knew what her father had taught her, that dignity is not given and it cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And Adiz Okonkwo had never surrendered anything in her life. The barracks were quiet when Adiz woke at 0500. She had always been an early riser, a habit forged in childhood when her father would shake her awake before dawn for their morning runs. The darkness outside the windows felt familiar, almost comforting. She swung her legs over the side of her bunk and reached for her boots. They were gone. She checked beneath the bed, behind her footlocker, along the row of bunks where other soldiers still slept. Nothing. A cold understanding settled in her chest. Not surprise, but recognition. This was how it would be then. Adiz padded barefoot to the latrine and washed her face with water so cold it made her teeth ache. When she returned to her bunk, she noticed something else. Her locker stood slightly open, and even from a distance she could see that it had been emptied. She approached slowly, already knowing what she would find. The words were scrawled in black marker across the metal door. "Go back to Africa." The letters were jagged and uneven, written by a hand trembling with hatred or excitement or both. Adiz studied them for a long moment, her expression unchanged. Then she walked to the trash bins at the end of the barracks. Her gear lay heaped among coffee grounds and discarded food wrappers. Her uniforms, her personal items, her father's Bronze Star that she carried with her everywhere. She reached into the filth and retrieved each piece with careful deliberation, wiping away the grime with the hem of her sleeping shirt. The Bronze Star she cleaned with particular attention, buffing the metal until it gleamed even in the dim light. Laughter erupted behind her. Adiz turned to find Staff Sergeant Renfro leaning against a bunk frame, flanked by two other soldiers. One was young with nervous eyes that darted away when she looked at him. His name Tape Redholt. The other stood with his arms crossed and a smirk carved into his face. Corporal Suttles. Renfro pushed off from the bunk and sauntered toward her. "Look at that, boys," he said. "She is digging through garbage like she is right at home. Probably reminds her of where she came from." The words hung in the air between them. Adiz held the Bronze Star in her palm. Her father's sacrifice reduced to a punchline in the mouths of men who had never sacrificed anything. She thought about the things she could say. She thought about the things she could do. Her hands knew 17 ways to incapacitate a man before he could draw his next breath. Instead, she simply looked at Renfro with eyes that had watched men die through a rifle scope. Something in her gaze made him falter, just for a moment, just enough for her to see the weakness beneath his bravado. Then he recovered, puffing out his chest. "What are you looking at?" he demanded. Adiz said nothing. She gathered her belongings and walked past him, close enough that he had to step back or be brushed aside. He stepped back. He would never admit it to himself, but in that moment some animal part of his brain recognized a predator and responded accordingly. She spent the next hour cleaning her gear and reorganizing her locker. The marker on the door would not come off completely, so she left it there. Let them see it. Let them remember what they had done when the truth finally came to light. Morning formation brought more of the same. Whispers followed her like flies. Someone coughed the word quota as she passed. Renfro made sure to position himself where he could watch her face, hungry for any sign of distress. Adiz gave him nothing. The day unfolded in a series of small humiliations. Her meal tray was accidentally knocked from her hands in the chow hall. Her assigned weapon for training was mysteriously missing, forcing her to wait while others completed their drills. A rumor began circulating that she had filed a false harassment complaint at her previous unit, that she was a troublemaker looking for a lawsuit. Through it all, Adiz moved with the same quiet dignity. She cleaned up her spilled food without complaint. She waited for a replacement weapon without comment. She let the rumors wash over her like rain against glass. Master Sergeant Crumley found her alone in the equipment room that evening, inventorying supplies that did not need inventorying. The older woman stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "You could file a complaint," Crumley said. "What they're doing is not subtle." Adiz continued her work. "I have faced worse," she replied. "I do not doubt it." Crumley stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I pulled your service record today. Most of it is blacked out. I have never seen that many redactions on an enlisted soldier." Adiz finally looked up. "There are reasons for that." "I'm sure there are." Crumley studied her face with an intensity that reminded Adiz of her own mother. "I made some calls, reached out to a few people who owed me favors. I do not know what you did, Sergeant, but I know it mattered. Whatever these fools think they know about you, they do not know anything." "No," Adiz agreed softly. "They do not." Crumley nodded once and turned to leave. Then she paused at the door. "Colonel Vance is visiting the base next week," she said. "Big inspection tour. Everyone is excited to meet the legend." She glanced back at Adiz with something unreadable in her eyes. "I wonder if he will have any surprises for us." She left before Adiz could respond. The equipment room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Adiz looked down at her father's bronze star, still clutched in her hand, and allowed herself one small smile. Next week could not come soon enough. 3 days passed in a blur of routine and quiet cruelty. Adiz learned the rhythms of her new unit the way a naturalist learns the patterns of dangerous wildlife. She knew which corridors to avoid and which times Renfro was most likely to be prowling for entertainment. She knew that Corporal Suttles always hesitated before joining in the mockery, a half-second of doubt that he buried beneath forced laughter. She knew that Private First Class Holt could not meet her eyes at all anymore. None of this knowledge changed anything. The harassment continued with mechanical regularity, each day bringing some new invention of spite. Her name was left off duty rosters. Her requests for equipment were lost in processing. Someone started a rumor that she had been discharged from her previous unit for mental instability and had only been reinstated through political connections. Adiz let the lies accumulate like dead leaves. They would decompose in time. The truth always outlasted falsehood, even when falsehood seemed to have all the power. On the 4th evening, she found herself alone in the day room, writing a letter she would never send. "Dear Mama," she began and then stopped. What could she say? That her father's legacy was being spit upon by men who were not worthy to polish his boots? That the country he had loved and served still found new ways to tell his daughter she did not belong? She folded the paper and tucked it into her pocket. Some burdens were not meant to be shared. The door opened and a young soldier entered, a private whose name Adiz did not know. He was struggling with a heavy equipment bag, his face red with exertion and frustration. When he saw her, he froze like a rabbit spotting a hawk. Adiz watched him for a moment. Then she stood and crossed the room. "Here," she said, taking one end of the bag. "Let me help." The private blinked in confusion. "You do not have to do that, Sergeant." "I know." She helped him lower the bag to a table. "What are you working on?" His name was Private Terrence Whitmore, and he was trying to prepare for his physical fitness test. He had failed it twice already, and a third failure would mean separation from the Army. His family had no money. The military was his only path forward. He was terrified. Adiz listened without interruption. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "Your form on the deadlift," she said. "Show me." Whitmore demonstrated, and she saw the problem immediately. He was lifting with his back instead of his legs, a mistake that would exhaust him before he reached his target numbers. She spent the next hour correcting his technique, adjusting his stance, teaching him breathing patterns that would conserve his energy. By the end, Whitmore was staring at her like she had performed a miracle. "How do you know all this?" he asked. "My father taught me." Adiz smiled at the memory. He believed the body was a machine, and like any machine, it worked best when you understood how it was built. "He made me study anatomy before he let me touch a weight." He sounded like a smart man. He was the smartest man I ever knew. Whitmore gathered his equipment, then hesitated at the door. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "I have heard what they say about you. The other guys, he swallowed hard. I do not believe any of it. I just wanted you to know. He left before she could respond. Adiz stood alone in the empty day room, her father's voice echoing in her memory. Dignity is not given, Adiz. It cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And we do not surrender. We never surrender. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Specialist Yolanda Reeves appeared at Adiz's side during breakfast, sliding her tray onto the table without asking permission. Reeves was one of only 3 other black women in the unit, and until now she had kept a careful distance from Adiz. Self-preservation, Adiz understood. Association with a target could make you a target too. You helped Whitmore last night, Reeves said without preamble. Word is getting around. Adiz shrugged. He needed help. Reeves studied her with sharp eyes. You know Renfro is not going to like that. He has been trying to get Whitmore kicked out for months. Something personal between them. Then Renfro should have helped him instead of hoping he would fail. A surprised laugh escaped Reeves. She shook her head slowly. You really are not afraid of them, are you? Adiz thought about frozen forests and impossible shots and the weight of 14 lives balanced on her trigger finger. She thought about her father facing down bigots in army bases across America, never flinching, never bending. Fear was a luxury for people who had never learned what they were truly capable of. No, she said simply. I am not. Reeves was quiet for a long moment, and she leaned closer. Listen, I have been keeping my head down because I have got 18 months until retirement, and I am not trying to make waves. But I have seen what they are doing to you, and it is not right. So I'm going to tell you something. Renfro is planning something big for when the colonel visits. He wants to humiliate you in front of brass, make you look incompetent or insubordinate or both. Adiz absorbed this information without visible reaction. Thank you for telling me. That is it. Reeves looked incredulous. You're not worried? Adiz picked up her fork and resumed eating. The colonel's visit, she said calmly, will be very interesting indeed. Reeves stared at her for a long moment, trying to read something in that impassive face. Then she shook her head and turned to her own meal. Whatever secrets Adiz Okonkwo carried, they would reveal themselves in time. Reeves just hoped she would be there to see it. The rifle range stretched out beneath a pale morning sun, targets arranged at distances from 100 to 800 meters. Adiz stood in line with the other soldiers, waiting her turn to qualify. She had not held a rifle since arriving at Fort Camden, her request for range time mysteriously denied or delayed. Now, the quarterly qualification had forced their hand. Everyone had to shoot. Renfro positioned himself nearby, arms crossed, wearing a smirk that promised entertainment. He had been telling anyone who would listen that the diversity hire probably could not hit water if she fell out of a boat. His followers laughed on cue. Even some soldiers who had not participated in the harassment seemed curious to see if the rumors were true. Adiz blocked out the noise. She focused on her breathing, on the familiar weight of the weapon in her hands, on the muscle memory that had been carved into her body through 10,000 hours of practice. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, using an old hunting rifle in the Texas Hill Country. She had taken to it immediately, something in her mind clicking into place when she looked through a scope. By 16, she was out shooting men twice her age. By 22, she had earned her place among the most elite marksmen in the United States military. None of the soldiers watching her knew any of this. They saw only what they wanted to see. The range master called her forward. Adiz stepped up to the firing line and settled into position. The world narrowed to the space between her eye and the target. She heard Renfro whisper something to Suttles, heard the muffled laughter, and let it fade into meaningless static. She fired. The first target snapped backward, a clean hit dead center. She adjusted her aim fractionally and fired again. Another perfect shot, and another, and another. She moved through the qualification course with mechanical precision, each bullet finding its mark as if guided by an invisible hand. The laughter behind her died. The whispers stopped. By the time she reached the 800-meter targets, the range had fallen completely silent. 800 meters was where most soldiers struggled. The distance played tricks on the mind, made the target seem impossibly small, introduced variables of wind and elevation that could throw off even experienced shooters. Adiz had made shots at twice this distance in conditions that would make these soldiers weep. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. Perfect hit. She fired 4 more times, grouping her shots so tightly that the range master had to use binoculars to confirm they were separate impacts. When she finished and stood, the silence continued for a long moment. Then the range master cleared his throat. Expert qualification, he announced, his voice carrying across the range. Highest score I have seen in 6 years. Adiz nodded and walked back to the line. She did not look at Renfro as she passed, but she felt his stare burning into her back. His smirk had vanished, replaced by something darker. She had embarrassed him without saying a word, and men like Renfro did not forgive embarrassment. Later that afternoon, Master Sergeant Crumley found her cleaning her weapon in the armory. The older woman pulled up a chair and sat down without invitation. That was quite a show this morning, Crumley said. It was a qualification course. Adiz kept her eyes on her work. I qualified. Crumley snorted. You did more than qualify. You made everyone else look like they were shooting blindfolded. She paused, watching Adiz's hands move with practiced efficiency. Where did you learn to shoot like that? My father started me young. Adiz allowed herself a small smile. He said every soldier should be able to hit what they aim at. That is more than hitting what you aim at. That is something else entirely. Crumley leaned forward. I pulled more strings today. Made more calls. I found someone who served with you in your previous unit. She would not tell me much, said most of it was classified, but she did say one thing. Adiz's hand stilled. What did she say? She said that if I was smart, I would stay on your good side. Crumley's voice dropped lower. She said you were the most dangerous person she had ever met, and that she thanked God every day you were on her side. The armory fell quiet. Adiz resumed, cleaning her weapon, her face revealing nothing. The past was the past. The frozen forest, the impossible shots, the men bleeding in the snow. All of it locked away behind classification stamps and security clearances. Colonel Vance will be here in 3 days, Crumley continued. Word is he specifically requested a tour of our unit. Usually he just does a flyby inspection, but this time he wants to meet soldiers individually. She stood and looked down at Adiz with an expression that mixed curiosity with something like respect. I do not know what is coming, Sergeant, but I have a feeling this base is about to get a lot more interesting. She left without waiting for a response. Adiz finished cleaning her rifle and sat alone in the quiet armory, thinking about a man who did not know her face, who did not know that his heartbeat was her gift to him. In 3 days, he would stand in the same room as the soldiers who tormented her, the same room as the woman who had saved his life. The truth had a way of surfacing. Adiz had learned that lesson long ago. No matter how deep you buried it, no matter how many stamps of classification you pressed upon it, the truth always found its way into the light. 3 more days. She could wait. The news of Adiz's qualification score spread through the base like wildfire. Soldiers who had never spoken to her suddenly found reasons to walk past her in the corridors, stealing glances at the woman who had outshot every marksman in the unit. Some looked at her with newfound curiosity. Others, those loyal to Renfro, looked at her with something closer to fear disguised as contempt. Renfro himself had grown quieter since the range incident, but Adiz knew better than to mistake silence for surrender. A wounded predator was more dangerous than a confident one. She kept her guard up and her routines unpredictable, never walking the same route twice, never being alone in isolated areas after dark. Specialist Reeves caught up with her outside the chow hall 2 days before the colonel's scheduled arrival. The older woman fell in a step beside her, speaking in a low, urgent voice. You need to watch yourself, Reeves said. I heard Renfro talking to Suttles last night. He is not planning to just embarrass you anymore. He wants you gone, discharged. He is going to accuse you of something serious when the brass is here. Make it official. Adiz kept walking, her pace unchanged. What is he going to accuse me of? I do not know the details, but he has been collecting statements from his buddies, building some kind of case. Reeves grabbed her arm and pulled her to a stop. Are you listening to me? This is serious. He could end your career. Adiz looked at the hand on her arm, then at Reeves's worried face. She thought about all the things she could say. She thought about the classified folder that sat somewhere in a Pentagon vault, filled with commendations and kill confirmations and a personal letter of gratitude from a colonel who did not know her name. She thought about the truth that was coming whether Renfro wanted it or not. Thank you for the warning, she said gently. But my career is not as fragile as he thinks. Reeves released her arm and shook her head. You are either the bravest person I have ever met or the craziest. Maybe both. My father used to say there was not much difference. Adiz allowed herself a small smile. He said courage was just insanity pointed in the right direction. They parted ways at the entrance to the barracks. Adiz climbed the stairs to her floor, already sensing that something was wrong. The hallway was too quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the linoleum. Her door was open. She approached slowly, every sense alert. The room beyond had been ransacked. Her belongings were scattered across the floor, her mattress overturned, her locker emptied once again. But this time they had gone further. Her father's Bronze Star was nowhere to be seen. Adiz stood in the doorway and felt something shift inside her chest. She had endured the insults. She had endured the sabotage. She had endured the hatred painted across her locker in crude letters. But this was different. This was her father's legacy, the physical proof of his sacrifice, stolen by men who could not comprehend what it represented. She closed her eyes and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the same pattern she used when settling behind a rifle. The anger was there, hot and bright, but she refused to let it control her. Anger was a tool. It could be useful if wielded correctly. It could be devastating if allowed to run wild. When she opened her eyes, her face was calm. She walked into the room and began methodically searching through the debris. The Bronze Star was not there. She had known it would not be. Renfro wanted her to come looking for it. He wanted her to confront him, to give him an excuse to escalate further. She would not give him what he wanted. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the base below. Soldiers moved between buildings. Vehicles rolled past on distant roads. The American flag snapped in the evening breeze. Her father had loved this country with a ferocity that sometimes frightened her. He had believed in its promise, even when that promise was denied to him. He had served with honor, even when honor was not returned. His medal was just metal and ribbon. His true legacy lived in her service, in her sacrifice, in the lives she had saved and would continue to save. Renfro could not steal that. No one could. A knock at the door made her turn. Private First Class Holt stood in the hallway, his face pale and his hands trembling. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump. Sergeant Okonkwo, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know where your medal is. He swallowed hard. And I know what Renfro is planning. He glanced over his shoulder as if expecting to be caught. I cannot do this anymore. I'm not like them. I do not want to be like them. Adiz studied him for a long moment. She saw the fear in his eyes, the shame, the desperate need for redemption. She had seen that look before, in young soldiers who had made terrible choices and were searching for a way back to themselves. Come inside, she said quietly. Tell me everything. Holt sat on the edge of the overturned mattress, his knees bouncing with nervous energy. Adiz remained standing, her back against the wall, watching him with the patience of someone who had spent entire days waiting motionless for a single moment of action. It started as jokes. Holt began, his eyes fixed on the floor. When you first got here, Renfro said, we were just going to have some fun. He's the new transfer, you know. He said you probably would not last a week anyway, that your type never did. I did not think much of it. I just wanted to fit in. Adiz said nothing. She let the silence do its work. But then it got worse. Holt's voice cracked. The stuff on your locker. Throw your gear away. All of it. I told myself it was not my problem. I told myself you could handle it. But then today, when Renfro took your medal, he was laughing about it, saying he was going to melt it down or throw it in the river. And I saw your face when you walked in here, Sergeant. You did not even look angry. You just looked sad. and I realized that metal meant something real to you. It belonged to my father. Adi's voice was soft but steady. He earned it in Desert Storm. Saved 3 men from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire. He died when I was 19, and that medal is one of the only things I have left of him. Holt buried his face in his hands. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I should have stopped it. I should have said something. Where is the medal now? Renfro has it. He is keeping it in his wall locker, behind a false panel he thinks nobody knows about. Holt looked up, his eyes wet. He is going to plant it on you tomorrow during the colonel's visit. He has written up a fake report saying you stole equipment from the armory. He is going to claim your medal is actually stolen military property, that you have been lying about your service record. He has got Suttles and 2 others ready to back up his story. Adiz absorbed this information with the same calm she brought to everything. A plan was taking shape in her mind, but she needed more pieces first. What else do you know about the colonel's visit? Holt wiped his eyes and straightened. Colonel Vance requested a full inspection of our unit specifically. Nobody knows why. Usually he just does a quick walkthrough, shakes some hands, takes some photos. But this time he asked for personnel files in advance. He wanted to review service records before he arrived. Personnel files. Adiz felt something click into place. Including mine? I do not know. Maybe. Holt hesitated. Sergeant, can I ask you something? That day on the range, when you shot Expert, you were not even trying, were you? I watched your face. You look bored. A ghost of a smile crossed Adiz's lips. I was not bored. I was just comfortable. There's a difference. Who are you really? The question hung in the air between them. Adiz considered how much to reveal. This young man had taken a risk coming to her. He had shown courage when courage was costly. He deserved something approaching honesty. I am a soldier, she said finally. Same as you. Same as everyone on this base. The only difference is that I have been tested in ways that most people never will be. I have seen things and done things that do not fit neatly into official reports. And I have learned that the truth always comes out eventually, no matter how hard people try to bury it. Holt nodded slowly. What are you going to do about Renfro? Nothing tonight. Adiz moved toward the door. Tomorrow, when the colonel arrives, I'm going to let the truth speak for itself. But I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to make sure Corporal Suttles is watching when it happens. Adiz's eyes held something ancient and knowing. He's not like Renfro. I have seen doubt in him. When the moment comes, he needs to see everything clearly so he can make his own choice. Holt stood and nodded with newfound determination. I can do that. He left quietly, checking the hallway before slipping out. Adiz began the slow work of putting her room back together. She did not have her father's medal, but she would get it back. She did not have justice yet, but it was coming. Colonel Harlan Vance was coming, and he was bringing the truth with him whether he knew it or not. She worked through the night, folding clothes and straightening furniture, her mind running calculations like a computer processing targeting data. Renfro thought he was setting a trap. He did not realize he was walking into one. The colonel had requested personnel files. He had asked for service records. Somewhere in a classified database, Adiz's true history existed in fragments and redactions. If Colonel Vance had been curious enough to dig, if Master Sergeant Crumley's phone calls had reached the right ears, then tomorrow would bring revelations that Renfro could not possibly anticipate. Dawn found Adiz standing at her window again, watching the sun rise over Fort Camden. Somewhere out there, a helicopter was being prepared. A colonel was reviewing briefing documents. A reckoning was taking flight. She thought about her father, about his gentle hands and fierce heart, about the way he used to say that justice was patient but inevitable. She thought about the frozen forest and the impossible shots and the man whose life she had saved without ever seeing his face. Today, that man would see her face. Today, everything would change. The morning of Colonel Vance's arrival dawned clear and cold. Adiz dressed in her freshly pressed uniform and checked her reflection in the small mirror above her sink. The face that looked back at her was calm, composed, revealing nothing of the storm that churned beneath the surface. She had worn this mask through firefights and frozen wastelands, through moments when death stood close enough to touch. She could wear it through one more day. The base hummed with frantic energy as soldiers scrambled to prepare for inspection. Floors were mopped until they gleamed. Equipment was polished until it sparkled. Officers barked orders with unusual intensity, their careers riding on the impression they would make. In the midst of this chaos, Adiz moved like a ghost, present but unnoticed, exactly where she wanted to be. She spotted Renfro outside the administrative building, huddled with Suttles and two other soldiers whose names she had never bothered to learn. They spoke in hushed voices, occasionally glancing in her direction with barely concealed anticipation. Renfro caught her eye and smiled, a wolf smile, full of teeth and hunger. He patted his chest pocket where she knew her father's Bronze Star now rested, waiting to be used as evidence of crime she had never committed. Adiz held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she looked away, dismissing him as she might dismiss a fly buzzing near her face. She heard his sharp intake of breath, felt his anger spike across the distance between them. Good. Angry men made mistakes. Master Sergeant Crumley found her in the mess hall, nursing a cup of coffee she had no intention of drinking. The older woman sat down across from her with a heavy sigh. The colonel's helicopter lands in 2 hours, Crumley said. Full inspection starts at 1100. He has requested individual meetings with several soldiers. She paused meaningfully. Your name is on the list. Adiz's expression did not change. Did he say why? No, but I have never seen a colonel take this much personal interest in a routine inspection. Crumley leaned closer. I do not know what is going to happen today, but I want you to know that I have written my own report about what I have witnessed since you arrived. The harassment, the vandalism, all of it. If Renfro tries anything, he will not be operating without opposition. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Crumley studied her face with searching eyes. You know something you're not telling me. Adiz took a sip of her cold coffee. I know that the truth has a way of finding the light. My father taught me that. She set the cup down gently. I also know that Colonel Vance did not become a legend by being foolish. If he requested personnel files, he had a reason. If he wants to meet with me specifically, he has a reason for that too. The helicopter arrived at 10:45, touching down on the main pad with a thunderous roar of rotors. Adiz watched from a distance as Colonel Harlan Vance emerged, his silver hair catching the sunlight, his bearing every inch the warrior his reputation promised. He moved with the confidence of a man who had faced death and found it wanting. She knew that confidence. She had given it back to him on a frozen hillside 16 months ago. The inspection began with the usual formalities. Speeches were made. Hands were shaken. The colonel moved through the base like a king surveying his domain, pausing occasionally to speak with soldiers or examine equipment. Adiz tracked his progress from the periphery, noting the way his eyes seemed to search for something, someone, in every room he entered. At 12:30, the colonel's entourage approached the barracks where Adiz's unit was assembled. Every soldier stood at attention, spine straight, eyes forward. Renfro had positioned himself prominently, his chest puffed out, his face arranged in an expression of eager respect. Suttle stood nearby, looking less certain. Holt had done his work well. The corporal's eyes kept darting toward Adiz with something like apprehension. Colonel Vance walked slowly down the line, pausing before each soldier, exchanging brief words. When he reached Renfro, the staff sergeant nearly vibrated with excitement. Sir, it is an honor, Renfro said. I have followed your career my whole life. You are a true American hero. The colonel regarded him with an unreadable expression. Thank you, soldier. Your service record says you have never deployed overseas. Is that correct? Renfro's smile faltered. Yes, sir, but I'm hoping to change that soon. I have been working hard to prove myself. I'm sure you have. The colonel moved on. Renfro's face reddened at the dismissal, but he held his position. Adiz watched the exchange with quiet interest. Vance was not what she expected. There was something searching in his manner, something purposeful in the way he examined each face. Then he reached her. He stopped. His eyes met hers, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Adiz saw a recognition flicker in his gaze, not of her face, but of something else, something deeper. The way a man might recognize the hand of God in his survival without understanding how that hand had moved. Sergeant First Class Okonkwo, he said slowly, tasting the name. I have been looking forward to meeting you. Sir. The colonel glanced at his aide, who handed him a folder. Your service record makes for interesting reading, he continued. What there is of it, anyway. He opened the folder and scanned its contents. 15 years of service, numerous deployments, and then several pages of redactions that required my personal security clearance just to learn existed. The barracks had gone silent. Every soldier was watching now, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Renfro's face had shifted from confusion to alarm. This was not how the day was supposed to go. Colonel Vance closed the folder and looked at Adiz with eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by surfaces. I think it is time we had a private conversation, Sergeant. There are some questions I need answered. He paused, and some debts I need to acknowledge. The colonel's aide led Adiz to a private office that had been cleared for the visit. Colonel Vance followed behind her, his footsteps measured and deliberate. The door closed with a soft click that seemed to seal them away from the rest of the world. Vance moved to the window and stood with his back to her, looking out at the base below. For a long moment, he said nothing. Adiz waited at attention, her breathing steady, her mind quiet. 16 months ago, the colonel began, his voice low and thoughtful. I was leading a reconnaissance team through hostile territory in Eastern Europe. Intelligence had failed us. We walked into an ambush that should have killed every man in my unit. He turned to face her. I took 2 rounds in the chest. My men dragged me into a ditch and prepared to die defending my body. We had no air support, no reinforcements, no hope. Adiz remained silent. She knew this story. She had lived it from 500 meters away, watching through a scope while snowflakes fell like frozen tears. And then something miraculous happened. Vance's eyes bore into hers. The enemy started dying. One by one, shot by shot, 14 men fell without any of us firing a single round. My soldiers thought it was divine intervention. Some of them still believe that. He stepped closer, but I knew better. I knew there was a guardian angel out there in the snow, and I spent 16 months trying to find out who it was. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken truth. Adiz met his gaze without flinching, without confirming, without denying. She had learned long ago that some secrets kept themselves. Vance reached into his jacket and produced a photograph. It was grainy, taken from a surveillance drone, showing a distant figure in winter camouflage nestled among frozen rocks. The figure was barely visible, just a shadow against the snow, but the rifle was unmistakable. This image was buried in classified files, Vance said. It took me months to get access to it. More months to trace the operator back through layers of redaction and security protocols. He set the photograph on the desk between them. The trail ended at a personnel file so classified that only 3 people in the entire military have clearance to read it. He paused. I am one of those 3 people now. Adiz looked at the photograph. She remembered the cold, the weight of her rifle, the mechanical rhythm of her breathing as she worked through her targets. She remembered the blood on the snow and the desperate radio chatter and the helicopter that had seemed to take forever to arrive. When I finally read that file, Vance continued, I learned that my guardian angel was a 31-year-old sergeant from Houston, Texas, daughter of a Nigerian immigrant who served with distinction in Desert Storm. Expert marksman. 17 confirmed kills across multiple deployments, all classified. He shook his head slowly. And now I find her here, at a base where she has been subjected to harassment and abuse from soldiers who are not worthy to shine her boots. Adiz's composure flickered for just a moment. How did you know about that? Master Sergeant Crumley is not the only one who makes phone calls. Vance's expression hardened. I know about the vandalism. I know about the slurs. I know about the stolen medal, your father's Bronze Star, that is currently sitting in Staff Sergeant Renfro's wall locker. His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. I know everything, Sergeant, and I promise you that justice will be served today. For the first time since arriving at Fort Camden, Adiz felt tears threatening at the edges of her eyes. She blinked them back with practiced discipline. "Sir, I did not save your life for recognition or reward. I did it because it was my duty, because you were an American soldier and I was in a position to help." "I know." Vance's voice softened. "That is what makes you exceptional. You did not seek glory. You did not demand acknowledgement. You simply did your job and disappeared back into the shadows." He placed his hand over his heart. "But I have carried the weight of that debt every day since. I wake up every morning knowing that I breathe because someone out there chose to save me." He lowered his hand. "Now I know who that someone is, and I intend to make sure the world knows too." A knock at the door interrupted them. The colonel's aide entered with an urgent expression. "Sir, there is a situation developing. Staff Sergeant Renfro is attempting to file formal charges against Sergeant Okonkwo. He claims to have evidence of theft and falsification of service records." Vance's face transformed into something Adiz had only seen once before, through a rifle scope, in the moment before death arrived. It was the face of a warrior preparing for battle. "Perfect timing," he said quietly. He looked at Adiz with eyes that burned with righteous fury. "It seems our friend Renfro wants an audience. Let's give him one he will never forget." He strode toward the door, then paused and looked back. "Walk with me, Sergeant. It is time for the truth to come out. All of it." Adiz fell into step beside him. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Dignity cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered." She had never surrendered, and today she never would. The main assembly hall was packed when Colonel Vance pushed through the doors with Adiz at his side. Word had spread quickly that something significant was happening, and soldiers had abandoned their posts to witness it. They lined the walls and filled the seats. A sea of uniforms and curious faces all turned toward the front of the room. Renfro stood at the podium, his face flushed with triumph. Suttles and two other soldiers flanked him like loyal lieutenants. On the table before him lay a stack of papers and a small velvet box that Adiz recognized immediately. Her father's bronze star. Renfro had brought it out into the open, ready to use it as the centerpiece of his fabricated case. He did not notice the colonel's entrance at first. He was too busy addressing the room, his voice carrying with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. "This woman," Renfro declared, pointing at an empty space where he expected Adiz to be standing in shame, "has been deceiving this entire unit. She has falsified her service record, stolen military property, and infiltrated our ranks through fraudulent means. I have evidence that proves beyond any doubt that she is not who she claims to be." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then someone near the back spotted the colonel and called out, "Attention on deck." The room snapped to attention with a thunder of boots and straightening spines. Renfro's head whipped around, his triumphant expression freezing when he saw Colonel Vance striding down the center aisle with Adiz walking calmly beside him. "At ease," Vance commanded. He continued forward until he stood directly in front of the podium, looking up at Renfro with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Staff Sergeant, I understand you have some serious accusations to make." Renfro's confidence wavered, but did not break. "Yes, sir. I have documented evidence that Sergeant Okonkwo has been lying about her qualifications and has stolen military property." He gestured to the bronze star on the table. "This medal, for example. She claims it belonged to her father, but I have reason to believe it was taken from official military archives." "Is that so?" Vance's voice was dangerously quiet. He turned to address the room. "Soldiers, what you are about to hear is classified at the highest levels of military intelligence. I have been granted special authorization to declassify certain information for the purpose of setting the record straight." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembly. 16 months ago, I was leading a reconnaissance mission in Eastern Europe when my team was ambushed. 2 bullets pierced my chest. I lay bleeding in a frozen ditch while 14 enemy fighters closed in to finish the job. The room was utterly silent. Every eye was fixed on the colonel, every breath held in anticipation. "I should have died that day," Vance continued. "My men should have died, but we did not. because somewhere in the frozen hills, a single sniper eliminated every hostile threat before they could reach us. 14 confirmed kills in under 3 minutes. The most extraordinary display of marksmanship I have ever encountered in my 30 years of service. Renfro's face had gone pale. He glanced at Adiz, then back at the colonel, his mind struggling to connect the pieces. I spent 16 months searching for that sniper, Vance said. 16 months tracking down classified files and buried records. 16 months trying to find the person who saved my life so I could thank them properly. He turned and extended his hand toward Adiz. And I found her, right here, standing in this room. Sergeant First Class Adiz Okonkwo, my guardian angel. The murmur that swept through the crowd was like a wave breaking against rocks. Soldiers turned to look at Adiz with new eyes, seeing her for the first time as she truly was. Renfro gripped the podium like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. That is impossible, he stammered. She is just a diversity hire. She cannot be a real combat veteran. She cannot be. Colonel Vance stepped onto the platform and stood inches from Renfro's face. This woman, he said slowly, has more confirmed kills than anyone currently serving in this unit. She has completed missions that you could not survive in your worst nightmares. She has served this country with distinction and honor while you and your friends threw her belongings in the trash and wrote slurs on her locker. Renfro's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Vance reached down and picked up the bronze star from the table. He examined it closely, reading the inscription on the back. Sergeant First Class Chukwemeka Okonkwo, he read aloud. Desert Storm. Valor under fire. He looked at Renfro with contempt that could have peeled paint. This medal belonged to her father, a Nigerian immigrant who served this country with more honor than you will ever know. And you stole it. You stole a dead hero's medal to frame his daughter. Sir, I can explain, Renfro began. You will have plenty of time to explain. Vance gestured to 2 military police officers who had appeared at the edges of the room. To the investigators. To the court-martial board. To everyone who will be very interested to hear how a staff sergeant conducted a months-long harassment campaign against one of the most decorated soldiers in modern military history. The MPs moved forward. Renfro looked around desperately for support, but his allies had already begun to distance themselves. Suttles stared at the floor. The other soldiers who had backed him melted into the crowd, suddenly unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. This is not over, Renfro hissed as the MPs took his arms. Vance watched him being led away with cold satisfaction. For you, he replied, it very much is. The assembly hall remained frozen in the aftermath of Renfro's removal. Soldiers stood in clusters, whispering among themselves, stealing glances at Adiz as if seeing a mythical creature made flesh. The woman they had dismissed, mocked, and ignored was suddenly transformed into something legendary. Colonel Vance turned to face the room, the bronze star still clutched in his hand. He held it up so everyone could see. This medal, he said, represents the highest traditions of military service. Sergeant Chukwemeka Okonkwo earned it by running into fire when others ran away. He saved 3 lives that day and asked for nothing in return. His voice carried to every corner of the silent hall. His daughter carries that same spirit. She has saved more lives than most of you will ever know, including mine. And how did this unit repay her service? With hatred, with cruelty, with the kind of cowardice that dishonors every soldier who has ever worn this uniform. Heads bowed throughout the room. Shame settled over the assembly like a heavy fog. Vance stepped down from the platform and walked to where Adiz stood. He extended the bronze star toward her with both hands, presenting it formally as if it were a sacred relic. This belongs to you, he said softly. Guard it well. Your father would be proud of the soldier you have become. Adiz accepted the medal with steady hands. She looked down at the familiar weight, at the inscription she had traced with her fingers 1,000 times, and felt her father's presence wrap around her like a warm embrace. Thank you, sir. Vance nodded, then turned back to the assembly. He raised his voice so that every soldier could hear. Let this be a lesson to every person in this room. The measure of a soldier is not found in the color of their skin or the place of their birth. It is found in their courage, their dedication, and their willingness to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. He swept his gaze across the crowd. Sergeant Okonkwo embodies those qualities more than anyone I have ever served with. If any of you have participated in the harassment she endured, I suggest you use this moment to reflect on what kind of soldier you want to be. The silence that followed was deafening. Movement near the back of the room caught Adiz's eye. Corporal Suttles was pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of anguish. He stumbled forward until he stood before her, his chest heaving, his eyes wet with tears he was too broken to hide. Sergeant Okonkwo, he began, his voice cracking. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. He dropped to one knee, his head bowed. I followed Renfro because I was weak, because I wanted to belong. I told myself that what we were doing was not that bad, that you could handle it. But I was lying to myself. I was a coward, and I participated in something evil. Adiz looked down at the kneeling man. She thought about all the small cruelties he had inflicted, all the moments when he could have chosen differently and did not. She thought about her father, who had faced men like Suttles throughout his career and had always responded with the same answer. Stand up, Corporal. Suttles rose slowly, unable to meet her eyes. Look at me. He forced himself to lift his gaze. What he saw in her face was not hatred, not vengeance, but something far more difficult to bear. He saw understanding. My father used to say that every person carries two wolves inside them, Adiz said. One wolf is hatred, cruelty, and cowardice. The other is courage, compassion, and honor. The wolf that wins is the one you choose to feed. She placed her hand briefly on his shoulder. You fed the wrong wolf, Corporal, but you're still young. You can still choose differently. Suttles nodded, tears streaming freely down his face. I will, he whispered. I swear I will. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Adiz removed her hand and stepped back. What you do next is between you and your conscience. She turned away from him, giving him the privacy to collect himself. The crowd had begun to disperse, soldiers filing out in subdued groups, many of them pausing to salute Adiz as they passed. She returned each salute with crisp precision, accepting their belated respect without comment. Master Sergeant Crumley appeared at her side, a rare smile softening her weathered features. That was well done, she said quietly. The bit about the wolves. My father had a gift for seeing the good in people, Adiz replied, even when they gave him every reason not to. Sounds like a remarkable man. He was. Adiz looked down at the bronze star in her hand, then carefully pinned it to her uniform above her heart. He really was. Colonel Vance approached them, his aide trailing behind with a tablet and a concerned expression. Sergeant Okonkwo, the colonel said, I am afraid the day is not over yet. We have just received an emergency communication from command. His face had shifted from ceremonial to operational, the transformation of a warrior scenting battle. There is a situation developing in the mountains north of here. A training exercise has gone wrong. American soldiers are pinned down by hostile forces. Adiz felt the familiar calm descend over her mind, the quiet focus that preceded action. How many hostiles? Unknown. At least 24, possibly more. Vance met her eyes with an expression that was equal parts request and command. They need a sniper, Sergeant. They need the best. Adiz did not hesitate. When do we leave? Immediately. The helicopter banked hard over the mountain ridge, giving Adiz her first view of the battlefield below. Smoke rose from multiple positions along a narrow valley. Muzzle flashes sparked in the treeline like deadly fireflies. Somewhere down there, American soldiers were fighting for their lives. She adjusted her headset and listened to the tactical chatter flooding through the communications channel. The picture it painted was grim. A training exercise had stumbled into a terror cell that had crossed the border undetected. 12 American soldiers were trapped in a shallow ravine with limited ammunition and no clear extraction route. 3 were already wounded. The enemy held the high ground and was methodically closing in. Among the trapped soldiers was Corporal Dwayne Suttles. Adiz processed this information without emotion. Whatever Suttles had done, whatever sins he carried, he was an American soldier in danger. That was all that mattered now. The helicopter set her down on a rocky outcropping 800 meters from the enemy positions. She moved quickly and silently, her ghillie suit blending with the mountain terrain until she was nothing more than another shadow among the rocks. Her rifle felt like an extension of her body, familiar as her own heartbeat. She found her position within minutes, a natural depression that offered clear sight lines to the valley below. Through her scope, she could see everything. The enemy fighters moving between cover. The desperate huddle of American soldiers in the ravine. The wounded being dragged to what little safety existed. She keyed her radio. Overwatch in position. I count 23 hostiles. Designating targets now. A voice crackled back, tight with tension and hope. Copy that, Overwatch. We are running low on ammunition. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Adiz settled into the stillness that lived at her core. The world narrowed to the space between her eye and the scope, between her finger and the trigger. She had done this before. She would do it again. The only thing that existed was the next shot. She exhaled slowly and fired. The first hostile dropped without a sound. His companions did not notice immediately, too focused on their assault. Adiz shifted her aim fractionally and fired again. Another body fell, then another. By the time the enemy realized they were being hunted, 4 of their number lay motionless in the dirt. Panic rippled through their ranks. They began scanning the hillsides, searching for the source of death that had descended upon them. Adiz remained invisible, a ghost wrapped in patience and precision. She fired again. Again. Each bullet found its mark with mechanical certainty. The radio erupted with chatter from the trapped soldiers. They're falling back. Someone is picking them off. Who is up there? Adiz did not respond. She was too deep in the rhythm of her work, the meditative focus that transformed killing into mathematics. Distance, wind speed, elevation, breathe, squeeze, move to the next target. 7 hostiles down, then 10. The survivors abandoned their assault and began retreating toward the tree-line, desperate to escape the invisible predator that was systematically erasing them. Adiz tracked their movements and cut off their escape routes one shot at a time. In the ravine below, the American soldiers watched in stunned silence as their enemies fell. Suttles pressed himself against a rock, his rifle clutched to his chest, listening to the distant crack of precision fire that meant salvation. He thought about the woman he had tormented, the woman whose gear he had thrown in the trash, whose locker he had defaced with hateful words. That woman was up there somewhere, killing to keep him alive. 15 hostiles down. The remaining 8 had found cover in a cluster of boulders, trapped between the soldiers they had been hunting and the sniper who now hunted them. They were screaming to each other in panicked voices, trying to coordinate a response to a threat they could not see or understand. Adiz keyed her radio. Hostiles are pinned at grid reference 472. Recommend flanking maneuver from the east. I will provide cover. Copy that, Overwatch. Moving now. She watched through her scope as the American soldiers began their advance. The moment a hostile raised his head to fire, she put a bullet through his skull. Another tried to break for better cover. She dropped him before he made it 3 steps. The remaining fighters realized they had only 2 choices: surrender or die. 2 chose death. They rose with weapons raised and were cut down instantly. The final 4 threw down their rifles and raised their hands. Adiz maintained her position until the prisoners were secured and the wounded were being loaded onto evacuation helicopters. Only then did she allow herself to breathe normally again. Only then did she let the stillness recede and the world return to its normal colors and sounds. Her radio crackled one final time. Overwatch, this is ground team leader. 19 confirmed kills. 0 friendly casualties after your engagement. His voice broke slightly. Whoever you are, you just saved 12 lives today. We owe you everything. Adiz looked down at the valley where American soldiers were embracing each other, where medics were treating wounds that would have been fatal without her intervention, where Corporal Suttles sat alone with his head in his hands. Just doing my job, she replied quietly. Overwatch out. She began the long walk back to the extraction point, her father's bronze star pressing against her heart with every step. The sun was setting over Fort Camden when the helicopter carrying Adiz touched down on the main pad. Word of her actions had already spread through the base like wildfire, passed from soldier to soldier in hushed tones of disbelief and admiration. 19 kills, 12 lives saved. A legend born in the span of an afternoon. She stepped onto the tarmac and found the entire unit assembled before her. Hundreds of soldiers stood in formation, their faces illuminated by the dying light. At the front stood Colonel Vance, Master Sergeant Crumley, and Specialist Reeves. Behind them, still pale and shaken from his ordeal in the mountains, stood Corporal Suttles. Adiz walked forward with the same quiet dignity she had carried since the day she arrived. Her ghillie suit was dusty and her rifle still warm, but her bearing remained unchanged. She was who she had always been. The only difference was that now everyone else could see it too. Colonel Vance stepped forward and raised his hand in a crisp salute. The entire formation followed, hundreds of arms rising in unison to honor the woman they had once dismissed. Adiz returned the salute, holding it for a long moment before lowering her hand. Sergeant First Class Okonkwo, Vance announced, his voice carrying across the silent assembly. Your actions today represent the highest traditions of military service. You engage a numerically superior enemy force and single-handedly neutralize the threat, saving 12 American lives in the process. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. This is not the first time you have demonstrated such extraordinary valor. It will not be the last. But today, I have the privilege of ensuring that your service receives the recognition it deserves. He gestured to his aide, who stepped forward carrying a small wooden box. Vance opened it to reveal a bronze star with Valor device, identical to the one Adiz wore over her heart. For exceptional meritorious service and acts of valor in combat operations, Vance read from the citation, I am authorized to present you with the Bronze Star Medal. This award reflects not only your actions today, but the cumulative weight of a career spent in service to this nation. He removed the medal from its case and pinned it to her uniform beside her father's. Your father would be proud, Sergeant. I know I am. Adiz looked down at the two bronze stars, now resting side by side above her heart. Father and daughter, united in their service, their sacrifice, their unbreakable dignity. She blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. Thank you, sir, she said softly. This means more than I can say. Vance nodded and stepped back. The formation remained at attention, but the rigidity had softened into something more human. These were no longer strangers or enemies. They were witnesses to something profound. Corporal Suttles broke from the formation and walked toward Adiz with halting steps. His face was a map of conflicting emotions, shame and gratitude warring for dominance. He stopped before her and struggled to find words. You saved my life, he finally managed. After everything I did to you, you saved my life. Adiz regarded him with calm eyes. I did not save you because you deserved it, Corporal. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. Because every American soldier matters, regardless of who they are or what they have done. She tilted her head slightly. That is what my father taught me. That is what service means. Suttles nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will spend the rest of my career trying to be worthy of what you did today. I swear it. Then that is enough. The formation began to disperse as the sun dipped below the horizon. Soldiers approached Adiz one by one, offering handshakes and words of respect that would have seemed impossible just days before. Private Whitmore, the young man she had helped with his physical training, embraced her without asking permission. Private First Class Holt stood at a distance, watching with something like hope in his eyes. Specialist Reeves appeared at her side with a knowing smile. I told you that you were either the bravest person I ever met or the craziest, she said. Turns out you were both. Adiz laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even her. My father would have said the same thing. Master Sergeant Crumley joined them, her weathered face softened by pride. "I have been in this army for 27 years," she said. "I have never seen anything like what I witnessed today. Not in combat, not in garrison, not anywhere." She placed her hand on Adie's shoulder. "You have changed this unit, Sergeant. You have changed how these soldiers see themselves and each other. That is a legacy that will outlast all of us." Adiz looked out at the base that had once felt like enemy territory. The same buildings, the same flag snapping in the evening breeze, but everything had shifted. She thought about her father, about his journey from Nigeria to America, about the obstacles he had overcome and the dignity he had never surrendered. She thought about the frozen forest and the lives she had saved, then and now. She touched the 2 bronze stars on her chest and felt their weight like a promise. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know what part moved you the most or which character stayed with you. Maybe you have witnessed someone reveal their hidden strength when it mattered most. We would love to hear your story too. The stars emerged overhead as Adiz walked toward her barracks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new chances to honor the legacy her father had entrusted to her. But tonight, she would call her mother. Tonight, she would finally send those letters she had been writing. Tonight, for the first time since arriving at Fort Camden, she was home.